Hello today and welcome back. In this day video I'm gonna show some more hands-on stuff on the CMDB syncer. It's not directly related to Checkmk, so if it's not interesting for you, you can skip here. For all the others, also the ones who requested it, now the hands-on to the CMDB syncer. I'm gonna start at the command line. First I want to show how to get objects, in this case hosts, inside the syncer. When I check the web interface, the list is still empty. And the general idea is that you need to import them from your source, like the CMDB or the database. In application plugins, you're going to find an example source plugin, which I'm going to explain now. All is written in Python. Basically, what you need to do is define a command. This is done in this line here. Then you add an argument. This argument is used to read the account information from the database. What I mean here is in config accounts, where you can create your own accounts. You can use this function then later on to get information. It's like that every account has a name and you just pass this name. So this is the first command line argument which you can pass to the get account by name function then. This function is found in the helpers here. And normally you're gonna read now a dictionary object with all the data from there. But to make it simple, I hard-coded it here in the example. The source thing we always need is an ID for the source and then the name of the importer. Normally, you don't need to think about the ID since the ID is automatically assigned by the database. You see that here in the URL. And then we can go on. I just assign here some simpler names, that's all, but you don't need to do that. You can use directly this here. The first thing is instead of output, I built a little library where you can use the color codes here to make the output a bit more readable. So basically you start the color code and you end it again, but that's not necessary. It's just that it looks a bit better. Normally now would start the part where you connect your source. It's like the database connect or the API connect. In this case also, because it's an example, I hard-coded it. And to make things easier, I have a list of tuples here. The first param here is the host name I'm going to use. And the second one is already a dictionary, which contains the labels. Normally, you would reading this from your source and then assign key value pairs. And this is basically the same I did here, hard-coded, key value, key value. The next thing, you iterate over your list. In this case, it's my list here. In your case, it would be the loop over the database, for example, just not the output. And now you're gonna use the host object. For the host objects, you just use the get host method, pass the host name, and you either get a new object or the reference to the existing one. You can also check if you really want to sync the object. It's especially if you need to do more than one call to get the information. You can delay the sync in this example for 12 hours. So the source from there on is only checked every 12 hours. So every additional operation you want to do is not done in this case. Also, what you can do is to check which labels are currently assigned to the database object. Then if you compare them to the ones we got from your source, you can also decide you don't want to update anything because everything is up to date. But if you found it then on the system, you set source update to let the system know that there is data. You can also set source not found if you want to. But this is only if you want to delete the objects also later on. The next function is just if you import the data from more than one source, you set the account ID and account name, and the system makes sure that not the other source is going to overwrite the data for this object. This function here will raise an exception, which you can of course catch, and if you don't want to prevent it, you can overwrite the account information, of course. Then finally, you're going to set the labels, and all you need to do then is to save the objects and you are done. Now as next, let's trigger the plugin. Only thing we need to remember is the command name we defined here. When I exit and enter the Flask, I'm going to see that I'm going to find my example import here. So it's Flask example import, and then you would specify the account name. In this case, since I hard-coded it for the example, I can do what I want. I hit enter, and update is done. If I then gonna look inside the host list again, like here, and refresh, I have my objects. If I check the objects here with this little eye, I'm gonna see that the labels are added here. So we are basically ready to go with the rules. Then let's see how we can export them then. I'm gonna use the help of a little command line option. It's like debug rules. This way I can see which is applied to an object. So Flask debug rules, and I'm gonna go with the first host name here. And I see that the database has these labels, but that after filtering, and by default everything is filtered, there is neither a label left than any other rule who lead to any action. The first thing I need to do is to whitelist the labels I want to have later for the filtering, and also later inside of, for example, Checkmk. Background here is that it can be the case that you have hundreds of labels here, because you have a really big CMDB. I have this example currently actually. And in this case, you want to just a few of them also use. So first what I'm going to do, I'm going to whitelist the state label. So I go back, I enter the rules, labels rules. I create one. I can give a name here. Not only can, I need to give a name. Whitelist state labels. I can then add one or more conditions. I go if equal match for label name is state. I could also go for the value. Then I want to add the label. Also, I can do some cleanup stuff. For example, I can make it lowercase. I can replace white space with underscore. I can replace other types of characters. This is only necessary if you want to use it for an other function where you can use the label name as automatically as a folder name. In this case, you need to be sure that in the label are not any characters who later on will make problems with the Checkmk folders. But for now, I say add matching, then I make it lowercase, replace the white spaces, enable the rule, save it, and I'm gonna check the debugger. And I see after filtration, I have now the state prod. I can add another one. I'm going to use the same rule so that we don't need to do that much rules. In this case, equal label name, what was it? The type. I save it. I go back. I check again. And I have all of them. Okay, first thing's done. Second, we want to add custom information. We can go with the custom host rules. This would be like add new tag. If there is a tag you don't have in your database, you can say as condition, if the host name what we have starts with srvlx, add param, custom label, OS Linux enabled, and this rule is targeted for the export. It's just an option where you can specify if you want to have a rule only used on an importer or for the exporter, but this always, of course, depends on the one who programmed the import script, because he is able then to read these rules from the system if needed. So I just save it now, go back, check the debugger, and I see that I have another custom label OS Linux as part of the rules. Also I see by the labels after filter that the OS Linux is already there then. And we can go to the final step then. We do the action rules. The action rule is like add to CMK. I can decide if I want all conditions to match any of these or without any condition. It would be like a rule who applies to everything. You can use this in combination with the last match feature. If the rules basically which are above all have the last match, only the objects will not match with one of these will end up in like this kind of rule. Also important here is again the order. I explained it in my other video. You can group the rules by a number here to make sure they are executed in the correct order. You can reuse, of course, the numbers, so you can use 100er groups and 200er groups like you want. In this case, I say all conditions must match. Add a condition. I can now either go for the host name, this is the green one, or I can go for the tag, it's then the blue one. I can say tag match equal OS equal Linux. You can negate the stuff even, add an outcome, and I can say I can move it to the folder Linux. I save it. I go back, I go to the debugger again, and it's not working. What's wrong here? It's OS Linux. The rule is not enabled. Back, try again. And the response is move folder Linux. The resulting action is that the system ends in a folder. There's more we can do. We can also say we want to use a tag here. Use value of given tag as folder name. So we have the date tag here. I save it and I check again. And the move folder is now prod because the label state has as value prod. And yeah, that's basically the stuff you can do here. I'm gonna explain the different options which you have here inside the documentation. The documentation you can find on the GitHub page. That's like on the project, makes a bit bigger, and the wiki. I also just updated here the basic principle of the system. And what we just did was checking the importer. We added the rules, and now we are ready for the final step. Export the stuff to Checkmk. I took the liberty to prepare an empty Checkmk page here. In the setup, if you check the users, I already have an automation user. I'm gonna use these credentials and I'm gonna need this URL. So if I go back, let's clean up some tabs here to the syncer in the configuration and accounts. I create an account. I name it video. It's gonna be Checkmk version 2. Oh, that was the password of the site. Not secret, but also the wrong value. That's the correct one. Then we gonna use the automation as a username. I better copy. And I gonna need the secret here. I create one, I copy, I save, I add it here, I enable it, I save it, I activate the change. And what I may want to do is to clean up my rule back to move host to given folder Linux. That makes a bit more sense than the other example. I save it. And then if this page is ready, I'm ready. Empty host list. Back to command line. I check my commands here. I have Flask, export to CMK version 2 with the account video. Then the export is started. And if I check again here, let it refresh, I have my Linux folder with the objects. Yeah, that is basically the system in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed and see you in the next video. Thank you very much.